Join the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective as they delve further into the mysteries of Bigfoot and other paranormal phenomena through the eyes of witnesses, investigators, critics, and skeptics. Join us as we look to discover what lurks from behind tall trees. Good evening and welcome to From Behind Tall Trees, the super chat that does not play favorites. It's a Bigfoot show that gives everyone a chance to speak their mind, present their evidence, and tell their side of the story, which in turn allows you, the viewer, an opportunity to make an educated decision as to what you believe. This show looks to stomp out confirmation bias and general Sasquatch stupidity, and who knows, we just might find out what's really going on when it comes to this Bigfoot thing. So here we go. Good evening. My name is Brendan Brown. I am the founder and director of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. We call it the CARC. Riding shotgun for tonight's show are two guys that really need no introduction throughout Pennsylvania's I-81 corridor and the Sussex County, New Jersey, depending on where you hang your hat. My good friends tonight, Mr. Sean Wagner and Chuck Larson. Good evening, gentlemen. How are things?
Hey. What's going on, guys? How are you?
How's everybody doing?
Doing good. You know, we got a big hill to climb here, Sean, because Charlie and Mike took the reins last show and really knocked it out of the park.
They did indeed, yes.
Hats off to your first show without the training wheels. Excellent job.
Thank you. No helmet, no pads, and nothing. Just
exactly. Look, no hands.
No
anyway,
hands.
so you guys have both been out quite a bit so far this season, and I want to get everybody up to speed on what's been going on with the adventures of Chuck and Sean. Sean, we'll start with you. Bring us up to speed with the Paranormal Trip and your several trips to Bald Eagle State Forest. What's been going on down there in Central PA?
Well, we'll start with the paranormal. That's the easiest to define and everything. 2 weeks ago, we went to Hillview Manor, which is out in western Pennsylvania. It's a well-known, allegedly haunted place. It's been on a number of TV shows. Every one of the main people have been there pretty much. We had a great investigation. We're still going over evidence. We think we might have some stuff already. Don't want to say too much at this point. But a little bit. As far as hitting Bald Eagle, I love the place.
You've been living there lately, huh?
Starting out.
You've been living there.
Well, we're going back this weekend to be on top of that as well.
Excellent.
But going back about a month and a half ago or so, we were driving the one road, and it was Mike and I. We ended up venturing out and looking for footprints, all kinds of. We found a bunch of footprints that we did put on the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group as well, posted there.
I've been seeing the posts. Excellent.
Yeah, and we also found we were going through, and we happened to see a space marked a drivable trail. It said like an ATV drivable trail. So I'm like, let's see if I can get my expedition along the trail. And we drove along it, and we found a road that I feel probably gets very few people along it. At the end, we came to private property, so there is no outlet really. A couple of openings, but mostly desolate territory. And there is areas where it's fairly thick. So I think it's an area that would have some potential, and we think we might have gotten a possible howl or so on one of our trips there. Not completely sure that's what it was for certain, but we do have something that we're not sure what it was regardless.
Well, good. Well, I'm looking forward to processing that evidence once we get it over to you. Charlie, or you get it over to me. Charlie, you have been Mr. all over the freaking place with your new car, driving to trade shows and conferences, handing out business cards. I see I see your picture on every Facebook post with good time, Charlie.
Charlie's the man.
What have you been up to? Tell us about the trade shows real quick before we get into it. We got to get our guest out here. It's going to be an amazing show, but tell us what you've been up to.
All right. Well, when Sean was doing his paranormal expedition, I was actually at the Michigan Bigfoot Conference up in Ann Arbor. It was the first annual Michigan Bigfoot Conference. Blake and Chad did an amazing job with it. I met a lot of great people. I met Adam Davies, hung out with him for a little bit. Ken Gerhardt, got to speak to him for a while. Cliff was there, Cliff Barakman. He actually did a video for my dad saying hi, so that was nice of him to do that. And I met a lot of great people in Michigan and in Ohio, and just trying to, work our network and see if we can get out and, get to some places and do some expeditions and filming. So
excellent. And you are spreading the prophecy of the CARC and being, what's nice about this is we're an open collective. We share information. We don't hoard it. And we meet people with open arms. We like to would do that. We got a great guest tonight. Before we bring him out, I just want to cover some real quick business from the home office in Colorado. And to do this, we're here at the show need to all ask you out there all a favor. Now, as most of you know, this show and the entire BXP channel is made possible through support from viewers like you. If you like the show, subscribe to the channel and share the content we produce here. It's really important to the survival of this show and others like it. Now, this show is a super chat. So if you've got any questions at any times, type them into the chat section. Try to use all caps. It makes our monitors a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier for the monitors to find the questions and get them to us as fast as we can. I believe the Vincent and the lovely Marla are looking after the chat tonight. So have fun and behave yourselves because they'll be monitoring the chat. And if you're feeling generous, hit that donate button. Donate to the show. We'll give you a shout out. So on that note, gentlemen, let's raise our glasses. I've got a Jim Beam and Coke. Charlie, what do you got?
A little Glenmorangie Scotch.
Nice. And Sean?
I actually just have regular Manischewitz cheap red wine.
Hey, boy. It all goes to the same spot, Sean, right?
Exactly. It does the same impact. Doesn't have
L'Chaim. There you go. Cheers.
Doesn't have to be overly expensive.
Don't break the glass, so it's plastic.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to it. Let's get to this. Tonight's guest is both a writer and a teacher. Currently, he holds the position as professor of journalism at Eastern Illinois University, home of the Panthers, I believe. He's also the founder and editor of ColesCountySports.com, the place to go for sporting news along the I-57 corridor. And if that's not enough to occupy his time, our guest also serves as executive director for the Illinois Community College Journalism Association. Now, I can all just hear you all out there going, oh, that's well and fine, Brennan, but what the heck does any of this have to do with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, right? Well, I'll tell you what. Tonight's guest also penned this little gem right here. It's called Monster Trek, The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. A book I discovered a while ago. I read it a couple times and said, hey, let's get this guy on the show and have him answer the question as to why anyone in their right mind would choose to write a book on this subject, especially a university professor with absolutely no skin in the game. So without further ado, boys and girls, I give you Mr. Joe Gisondi. Joe, good evening.
Good evening. I wish I feel like I'm missing out. I would have had a little Woodford Reserve and a nice tumbler here if I had known you guys were drinking.
Yeah, you want to wait?
I was actually going to do a Blue Moon because I know you had some Blue Moon in the book.
Blue Moon's in it. Any whiskey, but bourbon, please. It's
so you can always step away.
Reason to excuse for do that. Yeah.
Well, cheers anyway. Good to have you out with the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Now, you're not far from Terre Haute, right?
Terre Haute is about 45 minutes, maybe 40 the way I drive, but yeah.
Isn't that where like Christmas Story was supposed to be? Remember that movie, that amazing movie?
That was supposed to be in Terre Haute?
I think so,
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know that I'm just south of one of my favorite movies, which is A League of Their Own, was done up in Danville, about an hour from here.
Excellent movie. So, folks, tonight's guest, I want to give a real quick disclaimer because tonight's guest may ruffle some feathers out there. And so I ask all of you watching to take a deep breath and don't get overexcited if Joe's answers don't jive with your opinions. He's a journalist and he's just reporting the facts. So that's why we're here, to just have a good time. So I know, Joe, it's been a while since you read the book, and obviously you wrote the book back, I think, in 2015-16.
Right.
First things first, let's get this out of the way. What the hell were you thinking when you woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to write a book about people looking for Bigfoot?
I was thinking, man, I'm going to have the best time of my life. Seriously, I love to hike. My wife and I we've hiked probably 44 of the states in the country here, or I've been out to the state parks. We canoe. Matter of fact, we were originally supposed to do some whitewater rafting this week. We love to be out there. In addition to that, I've pretty much dug Bigfoot and paranormal. I mean, I've thought about, and I'm still thinking about doing a book on ghosts next or something like that. I love this stuff. When I go on vacation, one of the first things I do is, hey, where's the ghost tour? So I did one recently in Savannah. I've done about 3 in St. Augustine, one of my favorite cities. I did one in Gettysburg. That was amazing. I mean, I did one, where was it recently? Oh, Galveston. That was actually kind of creepy too. So I love this stuff. I grew up with the National Enquirer and reading all that stuff, and Bigfoot doing this, aliens doing that, ghosts haunting everything else. I mean, Maybe I was a little bit more timid and skittish as a kid too. But yeah, I've always loved this. I get to hang out with fun people in the woods. It's fun. This is what we do as journalists. We try to do that. I know some people try to rip into us, but we try to get it right.
That's one hell of a positive attitude. I know that you're from Charlie's neck of the woods. We talked about this in the pre-show. You're originally from Jersey, right?
Oh yeah, I still claim to be. Well, depending on who I'm with, I claim to either be a Jersey boy or a Florida boy.
Depends how much you swear, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Well, this is an adult show, so we let them slip once in a while. So it's clearly okay if you want to let your Jersey roots come out.
Well, that's fucking great.
So you obviously were a fan of the offbeat and the paranormal growing up, right?
Sure.
It's funny is I was kind of because you do cover a lot of sports now. You do with the journalism, and you're very healthy in the activities with softball and stuff like that. Did you play sports in high school? Were you part of that community, or were you kind of one of those guys that read comic books and kind of watched in search of? And what was like growing up in Jersey and then moving to Florida?
Oh, I was outside all the time. As a matter of fact, my father helped to found the Little League. It's called BBI, Bridgewater Baseball Incorporated. Did that. Yeah, I was always, I was on all the all-star teams and everything and did everything and played sports and was outside all the time playing tackle football, basketball. In high school, I did cross country and I moved from Jersey. We had soccer. We didn't have it in Florida. That was soccer and baseball were my two favorites. I did a little track, you name it. I wanted to play, but unfortunately I moved to Florida and I was only 5'2". So I suddenly wasn't growing. So they didn't know who I was. Whereas in Florida, I was still wanted because they knew I could play. And ended up growing like 9 inches by the time I was a senior. So by my senior year, I played a little semi-pro American Legion.
They're nice.
I was a decent athlete. There were far better people than me, but I just loved to play. That's right. The thing is, I love sports.
Now, what did you have a wife and you have 2 daughters?
I have 2 daughters. Yeah.
Now, what did they think about the book when you obviously presented them the idea and tell us a little bit about your wife? Obviously, she works in a unique position to kind of help you with what you were doing with the research, I believe, right?
Yeah, my daughters were kind of young at the time, so when I started really diving into this around, let's say, 2011 or 12, I guess they would have been, I don't know, middle school, something like that. Early middle school. So in the one chapter in Illinois, I did bring my daughter Kristen, who wanted to go out there, and Sarah sort of did too. So they thought it was kind of interesting to go out there and do it. My wife, who's a biologist, was in the state of Florida she's a nurse now. Mm-hmm. She thinks it's hogwash, she doesn't think anything of it, but she knows she knows I enjoy it, so she supports me in that way. But she thinks it's kind of silly, when I start talking about ghosts. And, and again, I don't know if they exist or not, but it'd be kind of cool if they do, start talking about aliens. And, I have no doubt in my mind there's people in other planets in this universe, and maybe they visited here. Who knows? I don't know. I know that Ancient Aliens is one of my favorite shows. It's one of the most creative shows out there, but it's not a documentary. It's an entertainment.
It's entertainment. And exactly. I remember when I think it must have been 2010, 2011, I think, when Ancient Aliens first started coming on the air, and I read the book, Eric von Daniken book, and now it's kind of spread into like everything is kind of they've taken that premise and kind of really expanded the branding on that. And so, but it is a lot of fun to watch. I think you could probably watch it on the History Channel nonstop. I
think there's like 12, 15 seasons or something like that. And my father fought in Korea, and he grew up in Jersey City. I mean, but he was always sort of into this stuff. He's the one who introduced me to sort of Eric von Daniken when they were popular, Chariots of the Gods and all those other books there. But he was also reading Edgar Cayce. He very much believed that there's connections in Atlantis and things like that. And I mean, he wasn't a major conspiracy guy, but he was open to the ideas for stuff like that. And, it probably helped that there was somebody in my family who was really kind of keen on that stuff.
Now, when you decided to do the book, you picked, I think in the book, there was probably 8 or 9 locations. I think you got Oklahoma, North Carolina, Illinois, Florida, Wisconsin. Now, how did you pick those territories, and were all the territories actually in the book, or were there some places that didn't make the book?
There may have been one that wasn't. I'll tell you what, one of the places I really wanted to go, and I was trying to work on my schedule, so I had a sabbatical. So for that semester, it was a fall semester, I traveled everywhere I possibly could and drove everywhere. But then I was trying to fit things in, like I very much wanted to go to the Pacific Northwest, but I didn't because it was kind of difficult for me to get out there with my schedule. On the other hand, everybody thinks Bigfoot's just in the Pacific Northwest, so I figured I'd spots that weren't the Pacific Northwest and weren't California. So I was trying to find places. The only place that I really wish I had gone that I didn't have a chance was in the Pine Barrens, because growing up in Jersey, no, seriously,
toast. We got to do a toast every time the Pine Barrens is mentioned on the show.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Joe. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. Cheers.
Well,
so I
wanted to.
So I wanted to go down to the Pine Barrens. I'm going to keep doing that until you guys are sad. So I wanted to go down to the Pine Barrens, to go out there and see what it's like. The Jersey Devil. I heard about it all my life. I figured I'm either maybe we'll find that, maybe find one of the bodies from the mob. Who knows what you're going to find down there? But
that is Charlie's territory all the way. That's what
cool.
Chuck lives down there.
Yeah. So that's why I always say, there's hiking in New Jersey. There's two things I don't want to see. First thing's a mama bear with her cubs, and the second thing's a couple guys with pinky rings and shovels. That's it.
Yeah, I'll take the bear anytime.
But what's funny is you mentioned all the places you went to. I was very surprised that I think Wind River Mountains, is that in Wyoming?
Yes, it is.
Now, you don't ever hear about anything in Wyoming. I've never read any. It was refreshing to see that you picked that location out of all the places that you went. And just so people know, I'll just read off the list real quick. And if I'm wrong, Joe just chime in. The Wichita Mountains in Oklahoma, the Uwharrie Mountains in North Carolina. A good friend of ours, Julie Wrench, will be on next week. She gets a ton of evidence out of there.
In Uwharrie?
Yeah, the Uwharrie.
Yeah, that was kind of a creepy place. We can talk about that if you want.
Yeah, we will. We did a show with Julie, and it was nothing but an hour and a half long of nothing but audio clips that she had recorded, and we had dissected from somebody. It's really a creepy place, so we'll touch on that.
Right.
Southern Illinois. Where did you go in Southern Illinois?
The Shawnee National Forest, roughly, Garden of the Gods, that whole area down there.
There's
actually a long history of stuff down there. When I first started doing this, Illinois, we were ranked, if you go by the BFRO rankings, I guess, if you go by that, I think Illinois, when I first started, was like in the low 30s, 40s. Now I think I checked this morning and it's like number 5, and I think part of it is if you have a good BFRO person who's writing these reports up too.
Mm-hmm. And then you had Eastern Kentucky, Salt Fork State Park in Ohio, and then Wyoming, and northern Wisconsin, which I think the northern Wisconsin chapter was really quite interesting with the people. So the book, in the book, the prologue, I think one of the first things that really kind of got me off on the right foot with the book is I think it's something like, it was well past midnight in the middle of the North Georgia woods. My bladder was full, but I was afraid to leave my tent. Now, you were with your family, correct, during this time? Now, this was not an expedition?
No.
Okay.
This was.
Come on, talk to us. Walk us through this one, Joe.
What was that?
Walk us through this, Joe. How come you were afraid to leave your tent?
I almost didn't want to write about it, but I was inspired by comedians who make a living making fun of themselves. So I figured, okay, here's me being a giant wuss. It's just weird. It's if you've ever been out there, I mean, I like that area too because it's not far from where we go whitewater rafting and where Deliverance was done and everything like that. So we were marching all around. I was with some friends of ours too, and it was like 2-3 in the morning, which to me, in the experiences that I had, if they do exist, in the creepiest ones, it tend to happen closer to 3, wherever I happen to be, and who knows what the times are if he exists or whatever it happens to be. But I zipped open it, and there was only about 3 tents in the area then, but it was this walk down to there. It must have been about a 50-60 yard walk through the woods, and I just was feeling weird. I've been in the woods a lot, but I was just feeling really, really weird. And I went, I don't think I'm walking down that trail. I think I'm gonna I'm leaving myself near the tent by the woods there. And I only had that feeling. I've had that feeling 2 other times in my life. One was when my wife and I, years before that, before we had kids, we were hiking in the western part of Virginia, in the Shenandoah. Mm-hmm. My wife was cooking something. It was early evening, like maybe 4:30, 5:30, something like that. And I had gone into the woods, and I forget how long I was hiking. I was all by myself. There was no one around. And suddenly got this feeling to stop. And I don't know where it came from. Again, this could all be my imagination, just like looking at clouds and seeing what you want. But it was just a really strange feeling. And I went, yeah, I think I will turn around at this point. And I turned back around and hiked back the 30 minutes or so and had dinner and everything. And I sort of had a weird one there's a place in Florida, not far from Daytona Beach, Huntoon Island State Park, and I think my wife and I were about the only two out there. And I was just like, wow, what's that feeling? It wasn't as bad then, but it was just something like I felt like something. But who knows? It could be nothing. It could be nothing. But it's kind of interesting because haven't had that a whole lot. So that sort of was it drove me.
Yeah, I think like and you mentioned it in the book, and I think it's true. Is that fear it's a primal emotional impulse, and it's kind of hardwired into the DNA, and it's part of that flight and fight response. And I've never personally had that happen to me. I would love for it to happen to me. Sean,
no, you don't.
Yeah.
Sean and Chuck, have you guys had any of that happen? You guys are awful quiet here.
Well, Joe, you got to come up to North Jersey instead of going to the Pine Barrens. Hold on a second.
Absolutely. Oh, okay.
I had a experience like that, and I was actually.
It wasn't the Pine Barrens?
No, it was up in North Jersey. It was actually in Sussex County, right by the town.
But it was near the Pine Barrens.
No, it was like 2 hours north.
Okay,
3 hours.
So not the Pine Barrens.
This guy, I'm gonna get hammered.
Okay, all right, move on. Go ahead, Charlie. What we
But anyway, I was with my sister's dog, and it was like a big. Yeah, it wasn't like a little Shih Tzu. It was like a big hunting dog, and we were walking, and I got the feeling of being being watched, and then being intimidated, and then the dog started looking at something in the tree line, and then when he stopped and didn't want to go forward, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna turn around and go back to the car because if he doesn't want to go, I'm not going. So, but yeah, I definitely had those feelings. It's
well, I'll tell you what. If maybe someday we can hook up there, I really would. I'd like to go back out there because some things I was saying early on is I feel like I really enjoyed writing about this, and I learned a whole lot. But not having had a Class A, situation here, I just didn't feel. I feel like it's unresolved.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is the search? The you were out with this people. What is the search? People look for big. What does the search represent for you? I think I'm not to continue quoting you all the time, but I think another thing in the book was I imagine if I can find Bigfoot, I can more fully believe in a supreme being. I don't think you're alone in feeling that. But what is the search? What do you think what did the search for Bigfoot? What does that represent for you, Joe? Then, and we'll talk about now later on down the road.
Sure. I mean, it's really, we have faith in certain things, and you guys are immersed in this, so you know what's going on in there and outside of America. But all these conspiracy theories, the kind of crazy things. There's some things that are conspiracy theories that shouldn't be because there's actual facts to support it. And I guess some people would argue that in this case there might be too. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when you're talking about, was the election stolen or something like that? No, it wasn't. I know some people will disagree with me, but the facts is like 58 court cases said no, and all the other people there. I mean, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to say that. Mm-hmm. Whereas, or wearing masks. Of course, it protects you. It's science. But people have these conspiracy theories for things like that. But with Bigfoot, just because it's unproven doesn't mean it's disproven. Mm-hmm. So I just I don't know if I answered the question there.
Well, no, it's like the search for Bigfoot. It's
with faith. It really is about faith. So right. I want to find stuff out. All my life, I still remember in Jersey looking out into the woods from my bedroom and going, hey, when did the universe start? Who created it? Who created the person who created it? Where does the universe end? All these questions we have that if we think too deeply about it, will blow our minds. They'll just cave in. But it's still the questions that we want to know. And I want to dearly believe, in a superior being. And I tend to do believe in one. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that all of the books and all of the things that have been written are completely accurate through the centuries.
It's weird because it's like we talked about this before the show and I'm sure Sean and Charlie can answer this. Is I've come to realize since my own personal search began is people involved in the quest to find Bigfoot or paranormal or UFOs. I think they all seem to have some sort of trigger mechanism. Started that for me. For the journey, I had an injury. I was banged up. I was laid up for quite a long time. I started reading more books and doing more research. It opened up the Pandora's box. I don't know if it's people have a death or an illness in the family, a struggle in faith. Do you think that there's a certain there was a short list of the people that you met that triggered them to come into the collective that is the Bigfoot community? What do you think would be the 2 or 3 points on that list?
Well, I don't know how many of them. Not many people agreed with me with this whole faith thing. Although there were some variations of that. Like one guy I met who I really like, and I've lost touch with him, Tommy Poland. He became a preacher in North Carolina. Just a great guy, smart guy. He and I talked about this probably more than most any people on here. I think most of the people is the other reason I do it is I think this whole notion of we're humans, we explore. Like, whether it's sci-fi show like Star Trek Next Generation trying to go into bold new worlds, that haven't been visited and things like that. We want to explore and we want to find out. And I want to know more about how the universe is. I want to know whether or not aliens are here, if they lived anywhere else. I want to know, is it still possible to have multiple dimensions? And I talked to a guy who worked in the FBI after the book was in here at a conference, and he and I chatted for a long time. And he said somebody told him at the FBI, they found out that he was searching for him. He thought he was going to get fired. He was a contractor for him. And they said, no, keep the search up. We know you're right.
Really?
And one person even told him, some people say there's maybe 13 dimensions. I'm not saying there's not, So he was talking about all these different things that perhaps our government is, not to go all X-Files and everything, but there's all these things that we don't know. I mean, there's no doubt we don't know everything that's been done research-wise, but who's to say there's only 3 dimensions? Maybe ghosts are part of a 4th or 5th or 29th dimension. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know. I'm not, to figure these things out. But, we learn things every century that we look back at 100 years earlier and go, that's nonsense. And maybe in 100 years from now or 50 years or whenever it is, we'll look back and go, oh, well, that's what ghosts were. Oh, that's what Bigfoot was. That's what whatever happens to be. So I think that, but coming back to your original question about why they do it, I think you and I chatted about, I think the camaraderie. Well, it's a group of people, and you're really of like-minded, and you guys we're all focused. Well, guys or gals, all focused on this. And I think, and if you've been out in the woods, it's a team. So me playing sports all of my life, I love team stuff. One reason I love journalism, it's a team profession. That's
a great point. Yeah,
we're all working with each other. So like you guys here, you're all a team. You guys work and have each other's back. You're trying to help each other out. That's just. To me, I think that's one of the biggest things, if not the biggest. And it's certainly my biggest draw outside of the other things we're just talking about, is that I really like that. I really like that a lot.
Well, it's one thing, and I know Sean can attest to this because we have lots of footage of him cooking during our outings. Is Bigfooters, whether you're Bigfooters or their friends, they love to camp and they love to eat. They love to get around, and there's a lot of camaraderie there.
Right.
And so there. But you coming in as a journalist, you're kind of the outsider coming in to do this. Was there any resentment or did you tell him what was going on with the book?
Oh, I was up front. I am, as a journalist anyway. I let people know. I said, listen, I'm coming in here and I'm writing a book on Bigfoot. I probably at the time, and this is the truth, I said I probably slightly more believe than I don't believe, or maybe I slightly want to believe, or I won't believe more than I don't believe, but I don't know, and I want to find out. And I don't want to write but I told them I don't want to write a book whether or not Bigfoot exists. I'm really interested in your stories. I want to know why you guys are spending hours and dollars, and some people even almost getting broke doing it. Why are you doing it? I want to tell your stories. And I told them I'm not here to make fun of you. I want to understand why it is you do what you do. And they really, most of them were like, wow, that's really cool. Thanks. I appreciate it. And I said, and a lot of times I'd say, hey, can I put the recorder on to capture things? Because, probably 90% of the stuff I recorded, I didn't use. That's right. In journalism, most of the reason you're not going to do it anyway. But I was forthright. I was candid. I let them know these things. I had some person tell me stuff. He said, I will tell you a lot, but you can never use my name because my profession, I will get, it's a very small one, and I will lose my job. I will get blackballed. And I said, absolutely. So if people told me on these expeditions, absolutely don't use me, I wouldn't use them. I'd Photoshop them out with my brain or whatever way you want analogy. But I think that was really maybe 2 or 3 people in all of the expeditions ever said that. But they really appreciated that I was willing to. And again, I think my credibility was helped because I am a journalist and I teach journalism and I teach that ethics and by and large, more of a sports person than anything else.
Now, when you were out there, let's talk about the first the first expedition. I think was with the BFRO.
The first 2 were at the BFRO.
Okay.
I did the first one in Oklahoma, and that one was That's where I met Matt Moneymaker. And
Ooh, do tell.
well, sure. I do write about it in the book a lot, but
Yeah.
we'll talk some more if you want other questions. And then
I
the second one,
I found the stories fascinating. So just walk us through when you first met him, and without giving away the whole book, because I do want people to read the book. It's a great book. And then the repercussions of you with the BFRO. Let's go through that.
Sure. Yeah, that was kind of bizarre. So I drive down there overnight. I think Oklahoma.
Now this is
from central Illinois here, about 14 hours or whatever it is. I'd never been to that area in my life. And I get there, I have directions and what's going on. And then they told me get on this channel on the walkie-talkie when I get there. And I'm driving up the mountains and I'm seeing cabins. And, I was like, okay, I'm not seeing anybody but a bunch of people in cabins. And I'm deep in Oklahoma in this mountain near the mountains. And I finally was on the recording going, is anybody out there? Anybody out there? I finally get to them, hook up with all the people. And then right away they said, okay, let's go out to this place.
As soon as you got there.
They came back and got me. Yeah,
okay.
that was very, very kind of Matt. And actually, he was very kind during that whole trip to me and very forthright. And right away we get thrown out there. I see something that I thought right away. I see something that I'm like, oh my God, through this camera that I think is Bigfoot. I'm going, no, I'm not going to be that guy. That the first time they're out there, everything, because there was a trip later on where people going, oh, look at the light. I see an eye. I see an eye. And he said, look at this. And I went, that's a porch light through the woods. I'm like, that's not that. And I felt bad saying I didn't mean to say it to make him look bad, but I mean that's what it was. Mm-hmm. The porch light is not Bigfoot's eyes.
So you gotta say what it really is. That's what we always specialize in trying to do.
Right. So we're out there with Matt, and I was with him all through the night, and I'm driving through places. I'm going, oh my God, I can't believe I'm not going off the side of the mountain. But then when I talked to him over the next couple of days, and he and I had one-on-ones a couple of times, and he was asking me what I was doing, why it is that I want. He was asking me about some of the other people, because actually my first interview, oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember his name. Who's the guy with the Georgia, thought he fell in the body, with the Georgia body. He's kind of a P.T. Barnum of the.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Of all the names I forgot, I can't believe I've forgotten his. And I also talked to another guy who's pretty well known in the field, and he was asking about some of those people. And I said, well, here's what they were, and they did this. This guy was kind of angry at me for I don't know why, but this other guy was. So I was trying to give him. It was give and take there. We sitting on the porch there, and he was telling me at that point about him trying to create a show, which ultimately became, I think, the Nat Geo one first, and then became Finding Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. So I was out there, but then I said, okay, I'll try one more BFRO one and go out there and make some connections. And that's when we went to Uharis and met a whole lot of wonderful people.
Rick Dyer.
No, not Rick Dyer.
Matt Wilson, Matt Whitten?
No, okay. He's like he made lots of money on this too.
Okay, all right. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I will think about it, and of course I'm forgetting. It's like saying, who's the greatest Shanky? I don't know. Yeah. I can't remember Babe Ruth's name, So we went out there, and then I went to another one in Oklahoma, and that was a really kind of cool expedition too.
Now, did you pay the admission fee? Did you pay?
Sure. I mean, I'm
ponied up.
Yeah, if they wanted it, fine. It was money well spent. It was.
Did you have to pay each time?
Yeah, I don't know if I had to pay the second time.
Okay.
The first, I think it was at the time you paid a fee, and then you could go on several of them, and then soon thereafter, I think they started charging a fee per. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. It wasn't at that time. So I think I paid like $100 or something like that to get into one, and maybe I paid $100 for the other. But I'm going, it's money well spent, and I'm getting access. I'm doing all these different things. But what I didn't do is I never signed the non-disclosure agreements, and they still let me out there. But no one ever checked. But I'm not signing it as a journalist because I'm not going to let anybody tell me, that otherwise then I lose all my credibility. I can't do that ethically. I can't do that professionally. So I tried going to a third one in Missouri, and that's when they started getting all over me, and I got some people threatening me that if I don't sign this I'll get in trouble, and then suddenly had some researcher I'd met saying I'm getting blackballed because don't talk to this guy because he's trying out to get us, and several of them said, no, we've met Joe, he's not that way. And ultimately I got to tell you, I mean, because I know a lot of people love to rip on Matt Moneymaker, he backed off. And then when I asked him some questions later on, I forget when it was, and they gave me some information, and he sort of talked a little bit afterwards, not a whole lot.
Right.
And the thing is, during this time, I got to know Cliff Barrickman, and I was supposed to go. Actually, I was going to go out to California, Oregon. Originally, I was going to go out there because I had learned about Cliff way before he was on the show, and then he was getting ready to sign. And by the time I was ready to go out there, he had signed, and they said he wasn't allowed to do interviews or anything whatsoever. And then about a year after that, he pretty much says, "I don't care." And so he and I, he's a great guy, a real smart guy, funny guy. And maybe my relationship, and I'm not going to say we're best buds in any way because we're not, but I really do like him. I respect him. I think he does some great work. When I was in Oregon a couple of years ago, he and I met up for beers. He even gave me a cast of something, and I'd like to go back.
Was that Matt or Cliff?
Cliff. I'm talking about Cliff Barackman. Yeah, sure. But I'd go talk. I do have beers with Matt or anything right now. I don't hold anything about anybody, and I was not intending to, but I did reveal the things I came across, the things that we had, and I talked a lot more in detail, obviously, in the book there. Right. But I know a lot of people hate him.
Well,
I don't in any way.
Yeah, and I don't think it's. I think it's. First of all, I think there's a lot of people that are envious of the position he's in because he's probably he's making a very good, substantial living since I think like 95 or 96 when he started the BFRO. So I think there's a lot of jealousy. I've never met the guy, but from what I've heard, I've been kind of guilty of dogpiling on from time to time because from what I hear are, the BFRO there's a certain stringent set of protocol for when you write a report. If someone submits a report, they have the right to edit it, change all the details in it. They own it, and then they can post it, and you have no say in what happens. And to me, that's very big confirmation bias, and that's tipping the scale in far wrong direction, if that is the case.
Sure. No. I've heard a lot of different stories along those lines too. But personally, he's, I don't think he and I would be best buds or anything like that, but I'd talk to him. I'd have a beer with pretty much anybody. But he seems like a decent enough guy, but he's ambitious and he's got an ego, and he's right and is within this field to have an ego because he's made all the money and done all those things.
I didn't know is he a chain smoker? He smokes cigarettes?
I'm trying to think at the time. I thought I saw him smoke a couple of times, but I don't know if he still is. I did see him smoke at one point. But
So you go on the whole reason I wanted to talk about this because you're an outsider. You get hooked up with the BFRO, you do your research, and then suddenly you're fucking you're persona non grata with the BFRO, but you still got to finish the book, right? So
I just started.
Right, exactly. So now that you're big, your ticket, your Moneymaker ticket, or whatever, your free ride to get into the hotspots of so-called Bigfoot lore. Now you've got to do the research on your own. Now you've got to find people, and what I've found, and the guys will attest, is Sean and Chuck, is to me, I found it's a series of gatekeepers, and you have to meet people, and certain people will turn you on to other people, and once you're vetted from that person, you're on to another person. So,
sure. Oh yes.
So how did you go about that after leaving the BFRO, and where did you go? Did you turn on the computer? What happened next?
Well, I've been researching, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, is that the best thing in the world was that I didn't go in a third BFRO because then it didn't keep me within the confines of just one organization.
Bingo.
So I just reached out to as many people as I could, and I thought, okay, where are some areas that I really want to go that I think are really interesting, that have some of the most interesting reports. I didn't want to write I didn't want to go on expeditions from the same type of terrain, same part of geography. I was trying to, and I thought, where are some other areas where no one really else is doing this?
You mixed it up. You were all over the freaking place. So
if given enough time, I would have done twice as much. But it shouldn't have been that long. It was about as long as it needed to be. Because sometimes you read even a Stephen King novel, I'm like, Stephen, you're a great writer, but how about cutting some pages out? But instead of 1,300 pages, 900. But who am I to say that? He's brilliant. But anyway, I just I don't know. I found people. And they talked to me. So I reached out to several people. I reached out to Carol Ann Solomon down in Florida, who's doing some really interesting work in the marsh. This woman who was on her own going out there, and I appreciated her a lot because my wife going out on her own and tagging, grabbing snakes and tagging gator eggs and all these other different things and driving airboats. And I'm going, she's the type of person I'd like to spend some time with to find out what's going out there. I reached out to Melissa Hovey out in Ohio.
I reached out to her after reading your book, and she's not as active as she was, but she was very impressed that I found her through reading your book. Melissa.
She's a wonderful woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was very helpful. She's a very smart person there. I really liked her. She was helpful. Billy Willard, I don't know if you know Billy in Virginia. I think he's sort of away from all this stuff now too. But he was very helpful. I drove out and spent some time with him out in Virginia, actually, that didn't get in the book, where he and I were driving around the FBI places and near Fort Manassas and everything. But I later hooked up with him in Eastern Kentucky when I was down there. So yeah, all these people, you talk to someone, you're right. You're sort of a made man once you get to know a couple of different people, and that was very helpful too.
And that's like Charlie. Now we're doing, our group, the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective, is a very new group. We've only been around for a little over a year, and it doesn't mean that we're new as a group, we're new as a collective, but we're finally realizing, through doing this show, reading a lot of books and meeting a lot of interesting people, and you meet a lot of great people. And Charlie, like I said, when at the top of the show, he's been going to the conferences. I'm sure you went to your share of conferences, Joe, and met people.
I went to about 2, like the Salt Fork one for sure.
That one, that was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
well, one of the first people I talked to then during this is Don Keating. He and I chatted one night on a Monday night. I remember that, but he and I chatted early on for like about 2 hours, and he was very generous with his time. And I spent like an hour or two with him on this park bench he used to hang out with and do a lot of his plays from, and he'd have some sites. And having Don, say some good things about me was helpful too, knowing that I wasn't going to do that. So most of the people, I'll tell you what, most of the people who do Bigfoot research are just really wonderful, nice people. They really are. And
there are some assholes out there. Let's not lie.
Well,
but I would.
That's a big percentage.
I'm one of them.
No, I'm sure you're not.
I tell you what, Joe, just going at these conferences, going out, like I smoke, so going for a cigarette break, and you're meeting all these different people, and that's when you get to really talk and hear their experiences. And then they'll introduce you to this guy and another woman, and and so you just kind of work your way through. But it's really fun, and I enjoy doing it. But it's boots on the ground, just in a different way. Yeah,
and that was the same thing with the shows. When we started the show, it's like, all right, we're going to do this live show. I've got to get guests. How am I going to do this? And what I did is I just went out there and I emailed. I found the people, and I literally called them and talked to them and asked them to come on the show, like with you, Joe, months ago. I said, "You want to come on the show?" And you said yes. What do you? The worst thing you're going to do is say no. I can't do it. Right? My world is not going to end.
Yeah,
and they're very accommodating. And it's like, when I started the show, had you said you're going to talk to a sports writer from fucking Eastern Illinois that wrote a book about Bigfoot, I would say, and he's a professor of journalism. I said, it's not a chance in hell I'm going to be talking to a bunch of fucking people running around looking for UFOs and orbs, chasing Bigfoot with laser eyes. That's not the case. Trust me, those people are out there, but that's not the case.
Oh, yeah, they're out there.
So let's talk about the woods. Now, we talked about the people. Let's talk about the woods. You were at the Uwharrie National Forest, which is a home of a very good friend of ours, Julie Wrench. Talk about opening up doors. Julie, if you're listening, thank you so much for doing all that you do for us. Let's talk about the Uwharrie, because you said that was one of the creepier places you went to. And our fans, if you've got any questions out there, tonight's Joe Gisondi is our guest. He's author of Monster Trek, The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. We haven't seen any questions yet, so don't be shy. Type them in there and let's go. But let's talk about the Uwharrie. Let's talk about what it was like to go through there. I've never been there, and I'd love to go there. It's on my bucket list.
Well, one of the things I did whenever I'd go to a place before I would go there is I'd research everything I could paranormal about them, which is not just Bigfoot. I wanted to know about ghost stories. I'll tell you what, I've never seen it for such a smallish area. It has a per capita for ghost stories and ghost books higher than a lot of others. It's really because of that. That was part of the creepiness. And then you go to some of these areas, small towns where the houses are going to pieces, but then you get out into the woods. And I remember Tommy Poland and I were hanging out, and I think it was the Zoar Cemetery, and across from the parking lot, from across the street, and we're hanging out in a graveyard in the middle of the night.
God, I love it.
At midnight, I grew up watching Creature Feature and all those other things. I was like, you don't hang up at a graveyard because they're going to pull you in, right?
That's Sean's got a tear in his eye right now because he's so excited about this. This is right down Sean's power alley.
Yeah. So, definitely. So we're in there, but Tommy's going. He tells me this story that I describe in the book about seeing Bigfoot coming in there and how it was. And so we sort of sat in the graveyard trying to find this stuff for probably an hour or two. Tommy and another guy and I were doing that, and of course we're talking ghost stories and stuff like that too. But it was just all these little graveyards. It's kind of funny, these smaller town where you see these graveyards that I don't know if anybody even takes care of these anymore, which is really sad. We have some areas here in East Central and in Southern Illinois too, but just the feel and the vibe of the the graveyard there, all the ghost stories that were going on. It ended up, I think it was weeks or months later, Michael Green put sounds like Beetlejuice, but he put a Zagnut there. A Zagnut. Remember, Beetlejuice is trying to get the Zagnut. But he puts one out there, and he got some video that was probably 20, 50 yards behind my campsite, later on. And I didn't necessarily feel as creeped out in there, but I went out one day. We went in this one area we're going to go at night, and I went out early on with a group. Mm-hmm. We saw these tied off things, and I'm going, wow, could that be the wind? And could that be the wind? Because I don't know. I'm not an expert here. And then somebody said, what did you see? And then some other people out there are like, wow, look at this and this and that. Then we went out again later on that night, and that's, of course, when someone saw a porch light that thought it was a Bigfoot eye. But there was a lot of just some interesting feels there. It's not a place that I would want to be hanging out at night all by myself. No, it wasn't the creepiest place I saw, but it was. The creepiest moment I ever had is, Brendan, you were telling me about, sent me some sounds and such, was, the sounds coming through the woods in the green in Florida.
Now we were kind of joking with you about this before the show, and because it happened to Sean and I on an investigation is so you're out there, you're trying to get all this evidence. You got people giving you $10,000 binoculars, it seems port lights. You're hearing things that aren't necessarily Bigfoot. They're telling you this is Bigfoot, that's Bigfoot. But what evidence did you take? What happened to you in Florida or any other place maybe that wasn't in the book that made you go, shifted that paradigm just a little bit?
Well, when you're in the middle of the woods at 2 a.m, you friggin' believe in Bigfoot. It's easy to discount it, sitting here in my office right now going, oh, it doesn't exist, please. The same way with the lights on, it's, and my family around, not being afraid of ghosts, but, all in a creepy old house in the middle of the night. I don't know if I want to do that either, right?
Right.
So the things that really made me was, one is, if you've ever been through Florida, and I mean real Florida, and you're going through the woods, it's pretty tough to get through that. It's swampy, and there's vines, and on top of all the critters and the gators, and nowadays, boas and pythons and all the other things that are out there. But it's tough to get through. You're trying to hack through, and so you try to go in some trails and. You sit down sometimes, and I'm not creeped out by being in the woods there. I'd sit down. I remember one time just looking down at all the various different types of spiders that were there, and ended up talking to a guy who told me that the Green Swamp probably has about 2 million spiders per square mile.
I saw that in the book. And the banana spiders, yes.
Yeah. So even though here in Illinois, I think I get more spiders in my house, and I think they said that we had like 250,000 spiders per square mile or something like that. But so, you're going through this area and you're just slog and trying to get the boots and trying to get one step over the other. When you're not on the trails, I'm not talking about going to the state parks. If you go into,
you're bushwhacking through Palmetto and all that crap, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. So I knew that area. We were in this little slip of a land that was sandy and everything else. And then, and as a matter of fact, the week before, this probably this most terrifying thing is we saw things that looked like hogs had just torn the place up. You don't want to be around those suckers. You just don't. But so you have all of these different things out there, but even they could not go through there. So I heard something that sounded like, the best way I could describe it was like the Planet of the Apes when they all start attacking in mass. And they're just going, and you're hearing the scream and the yell. Like the modern version of it, not the old.
And this is in the Green Swamp?
This was in the Green Swamp. Okay. So I'm sitting there next to Carol Ann Solomon, and I forget who, Donna Coors was there, but Carol Ann and I were just going, I said, what the heck is that? He goes, oh, it's the 10-pound owl, because she always talked about the sounds like an owl, but it runs through. And it's coming closer and closer, and I have my cell phone, damn it, right in my hand, and I never turned it on.
call
It's
yourself
like
a journalist. You call yourself a journalist.
No, not anymore. I am the worst journalist ever because this would have been the best. I'm so, even now I'm frustrated I didn't do it. And I'm just because I was just trying to listen the best I could because I'm sitting here and I'm probably about 3 feet from the tree line, if that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing something from the distance go and louder and louder. It's like it's going through the woods, and it sounded like more than one whatever.
Right.
And it's going, and then suddenly, when I just thought I was going to burst through the woods, it just stopped. And I'm just like, okay, is something there? So I'm looking, and we're just like looking at each other. And I went, and I probably said something like, "What the fuck was that?" And
it seems to be the go-to phrase. Yes.
Oh my God! I certainly thought it if I didn't even say it. I'm going, what the hell was that? And she just sort of turned to me and like smiled, like, "Yep, see, they're out there." And I'm just like, wait a minute. If it's out there, it could just take 2 steps out and just destroy it.
See, that's the thing is you meet people and you hear all these stories from people, and then you have an experience like right. Just you telling me that story, I could see the way you were telling it to me. My heart was actually beginning to pound, and I could hear it in my head and visualize you telling me that story. That is that's the pay dirt right there, right? That's what you were there for, and you would love to have that happen every night. But the realization is that doesn't happen every night.
Oh no, it's more often than not. It's just like, well, I mean, that's scientific research. Those people who have done it, and people I've talked to, and my wife and everybody else who do research, it's like for every 100 failures, you get that one success, and you're thinking, oh, that good, we did something, So, imagine all these National Geographic people who are taking photos and trying to get things, or Jane Goodall out in the woods, who, by the way, believes in Bigfoot, as you probably know.
Yeah.
So they're out there. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of time to really observe, and you need to have some knowledge too. Like, I'm not the one to do the true research out there for Bigfoot because I don't have it. There's some things that I can provide, just like you guys. I mean, I don't know if you guys have science backgrounds too, but even if you don't, there's things we can provide. And of course, if we have visual evidence and audio, that's essential. You don't have to have science for all of that.
Right.
I wish I had that audio there, because the only other time that I really had that sort of adrenaline rush was in the Oklahoma in the Wichita Mountains when we were going through the night. And think about this. In retrospect, I'm going, well, that sounds like dumb 101. Why the hell did we do that? We put this woman out in the middle of the woods in an area that was supposed to be with lots of Bigfoot and everything like that. And of course,
take notes, Charlie. Charlie, take notes. We need to do this.
Yes.
Go ahead. Tell the story, Joe.
But puts this woman out there. Again, I write more detail. And
bait.
Yes, it's bait. So here I am, about 60, 100 yards away, ducked down an area next to this other guy. And people like scattered and sometimes most of them were even farther away than we were. And then suddenly, and this is a woman who, by the way, used to go out at night in the middle of the woods in Ohio on her own and try to bait and see what she could find from Bigfoot. Just her and her dog. She would just go out there, and sometimes she was afraid to get out of her tent and everything like that. But she would just go out there, and I came across her several different times. I'm thinking, you are way braver than me, because the first time I went out, I'm surrounded by people. I'm like, hey, don't get too far away from me, okay? I'm just like, I don't want to be the one picked off. I don't want to be the person in Star Trek who's in the red uniform that you don't see in the next
Exactly.
scene.
You don't want to be the security detail from the Enterprise, right? Those guys, the guys in red shirts never come back.
And I'm going, I need to finish this book, man. So she did it all the time, and they put her out there, and she and I had some good conversations, and she was just going, guys, I'm feeling really weird right now. And then she talks about feeling weirder and weirder, and she was getting uptight, and she goes, I see these big red eyes. They're cutting closer to my tent. I don't know what to do. I mean, she was suddenly like losing it, and I heard all of this over the
the radio,
over the radios that we were all sharing. So the guy and I were the second or third closest, and like we sprinted. So somebody got there probably about 5-10 seconds maybe before we did, maybe 30 seconds tops, and he was checking her pulse. Her pulse was off the charts. This guy was a medic who got to her first. She was just off the charts and really uptight. And earlier that night is kind of interesting, and even a little bit later, the guy I was standing mostly with that night had some pebbles thrown at him, he says. I did not. He did. that they were like little rocks that were thrown. Nothing big.
I have a hard time with when we hear those things in anywhere that's got oak trees. It's hard to it really is hard to to take that seriously. But what part of that you're talking about, that lady, the lady, what part of that, I mean, do you think is the imagination is a very dangerous thing, and people can talk themselves into panic attacks and fear, right? So you don't need to name names, but do you really think she was kind of a little
No, that's why it really had an impact on me. That I saw her, I talked to her the next day about it, I talked to her later on, I talked to her once on the phone. This is a woman she was tough. Like, it would be akin to my wife being out there.
That's
if my wife were out there and suddenly got uptight and had all those feelings, something's out there. Something, whether it's imagined or true, but it takes a lot to get, someone like that flustered. And for her to have been that flustered that night, because we went running out in the area where they said, and like idiots, like, what am I going to do with a large,
You'd be so famous if you got your arm ripped off by Bigfoot, Joe. Just think how famous you'd be.
Right. So, finally, I'd be like the guy in, what was it, Life of Brian, where I still got a foot left. I don't know that I want to be that famous. But it would be bizarre for something like that to happen.
Well, that's the thing is you meet people and like you said, this person is right. And we have a guest coming on in a month or so, and I won't mention her name, but she lives out west. And I talked to her. She's a field reporter.
Terrified. She was absolutely terrified.
Field reporter for National Geographic, had a Class A sighting within 15 feet, and she has not seen 15 feet. And she told the way she told me the story, it was terrifying. And she is as sane as they get. So either she's lying or there's something to it. So what do you think with the paranormal? Do you think there's and I know this is really reaching out there because your wife's probably.
No, I've heard all the stories.
Do you think with this infrasound and this paranormal and all, do you think there's anything to that? And maybe that's why the discovery has been so difficult, or do you think it's just?
I can only speculate. Like, it's one of those things where if I don't know, we can chat about it. It's fun to chat about. So I'll chat about it here. Yeah. But I don't know because this woman actually got sick and actually died later from, I think she had leukemia or cancer, and she had no history of it until all this things had happened. And people will say that if you get ultrasound hit at your heart, people want to believe, I don't know if it's the same in science. People have told me, I haven't had a chance to research it. I heard this later on.
Right.
So maybe that's something. I've heard stories about them being paranormal, and maybe because of that, they're able to go into different dimensions and go away. I tend to think that, it's certainly one of many theories that possibly could happen. I don't know. I tend to think not, but I'm also open to the fact that maybe.
Well, but you mentioned earlier in the show that you're open to the fact of UFOs and ghosts and stuff like that. If you're open to that, and when we started the show, I was what they call an aper, right? Apers are the flesh and blood guys, but I've tended to lean a little bit more the paranormal, much to the chagrin of my friends Charlie and Sean, because nothing has been found. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a pro. I'm not an expert. Nobody is. But it sure is fun to wonder. This hour has freaking flown by. It literally has. Literally, Vincent says it's grown wings and flown by. I got a couple more questions. If you stick with us just a little bit more, Joe, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, the expeditions, you had some great expeditions. Give us the one. I think there was one where you ended up kind of sitting in the guy's backyard amongst a bunch of broken down cars and a bunch of crap.
That was my least fun one.
Yeah, you don't need to throw anybody under the bus, but if you can walk us through what happened with that, you don't need to even mention the state. People can read the book.
It's Eastern Kentucky, and you could probably find. I mentioned the people's names.
Right. I really want people to
have like a stream in his backyard and the stream, and he had this live stream going on that people would just. Sometimes you'd see 100 people or more just watching this backyard. I did it for a couple of hours one night just because I figured. I'm writing a book on. I got to find this out. I didn't see anything, but it was rainy, and there was a lot of really good people there. But the expeditions, we didn't really go much place. We pretty much hung in the backyard because there was a lot of, and I was really intrigued by this. I thought this is really different. This isn't the way most people do Bigfoot research. Right. So we all sat around, but I tend to think that I'd like to know more about the person from, I don't know if it's National Geographic or not. the whole notion of the situation, how I don't know if they've changed how they do it. The whole thing about BFRO or any large group that goes out, I think you're not going to have success from the beginning unless you really, really break off. Because I can't imagine a creature that's been this elusive for, since the dawn of man, if that's it, or if it's a Gigantopithecus or whatever it happens to be. I can't imagine this thing's going to go, 20 loud people from the city are going to catch me. It's just not going to happen. That photographer is probably quietly out there doing something, and suddenly, if Bigfoot exists, surprise this creature. It was like, what the heck? Not thinking about it, and that's how you find these things. I just checked in the BFRO site in July, and most of the sites are, I was just driving down the street, or I was just doing this. It was never, hey, I was in a group of 20 people trying to find this thing, and we found them. Yeah, we did it. We do it that way.
We're by no means professionals at what we do, but Sean, you want to explain to him and to the people how we do our expeditions with the separate groups? Sean's been awful quiet today, so we want to get Sean out there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where to begin exactly, but we generally try to set up two groups. Generally, one group will stay close to basically a main road. We have other people go climb up a path, walk probably about half a mile or so away, maybe a little further than that. Actually, probably more like a mile. And a lot of times we'll take in call blast. Usually we'll wait about a half hour from when we first get all settled down where we want to be. And then about every half hour we set up 2 or 3 blasts and see if we get something. That's what we do for the most part in our nighttime festivities. And during the daytime, of course, we do try to go around and find possible signs, or at least something unusual in the woods that we can put somewhere for people to comment on or check out, see if it's interesting at all. And of course, most importantly, I always say it's nice to just be out in the woods. That's got to be the number one thing regardless.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds cool. I mean, like when I go on these ghost adventures across the country, I don't expect to see a ghost, but I want to be at the places where people say they have seen them. I want to hear the stories and the history. So, I mean, I would encourage people to go out on any of these expeditions, BFRO, yours, or whatever, because it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's a great way to put it.
Background, you're going to be in the woods. Don't go out there expecting to find Bigfoot. If something like that happens, great. If you hear a wood knock, great. If you hear something else, fantastic. But even if you don't, it's still a blast. I want to go out on a couple more myself.
You got to come with us sometimes. The door is always open for you. You said that you went to Gettysburg a couple times, correct, Joe?
Where?
Gettysburg. You did some.
Yeah, well, I'm a history buff, and I've gone there.
Sean's wheelhouse right there.
But I want to go back to there. Oh, the ghost tours, man! I just loved that ghost tour. Was fantastic. But I learned a lot of history too. But it was great. I dig ghost stuff. I dig all this stuff. It's fun to do this. I would rather go to on ghost tours or a Bigfoot expedition or something like this than go to Disney, man. It's a lot more fun.
We'll have to hook up this fall and get you. We'll try to get a calendar and find a place where we can meet up. You can come out with us. Yeah, Sean, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to ask, while doing your research and that for the book, and you got to meet a lot of people from doing it. Was anything you learned from people who do the investigations of it a surprise to you by chance? And if so, what was it maybe?
I was kind of surprised that someone sat in their backyard. No, one person would blast out kids' sounds. Another one did dogs and stuff like that. Because, I mean, all the stories about how they're supposed to be nice to kids and things like that. But, I don't believe that necessarily, because go read the stories about the old tales, even about the sugar fields in Florida. There's all kinds of stories and songs and poems warning people to not go out into the woods if you hear something, because they're going to snatch you.
I love that.
If you're a child. Oh, yeah. All kinds of cool stuff with that. So I don't know that. Here's the person who impressed me more than anybody, absolutely anywhere. I went out with Jeff Meldrum in the Wind River Mountains, and he was kind enough, I guess maybe because I was a fellow academia or whatever it happens to be, and he's a guy who knows science better than probably more than almost anybody. But the guy who I think is his equal as a scientist is John Mazinski. I don't know if you guys have heard about him. I know I wrote about it in the book, but outside of that, this guy is like William Bartram. He's like this old science guy with journals. Well, in this one, I happen to be, this is how bad of a, I guess, husband and dad I was. When I went out in the mountains, I left my wife and daughters down, in a campground.
In civilization.
Yeah, well, sort of. They were in a campground, not far from me, so. But I was up the mountain probably about 45 minutes an hour, and we slept overnight. But I got to know John Mazinski, and this guy is a science guy through and through. He afterwards invited myself and my wife and my 2 daughters to his place. He lives in this small little place, and it's not far from one of the great steakhouses out there. But it's like he lived in this town of about 100 to 300 people, and he felt he got too big, and he moved up the mountain.
Nice.
He built his whole house on, I don't know if you've been out west where they have these snow bridges, and they put all these large logs and everything to prevent the drifts from coming out onto the ocean and onto the roads. I've
seen them for railroad tracks and stuff. When I went through Tahoe and stuff like that. Yeah.
He built his cabin that way. He has this old cabin. He has his own things lit up. I mean, he's got his own little garden. He was making things and the way he lived. I felt like I was at, Jamestown or something. Looking at that's the kind of place he had. But he was self-sufficient. He was off the grid. I mean, he even had Robert Redford even heard about him. We can talk to this guy.
That's pretty dope.
But this guy is just John Mazinski. When John Mazinski tells me he's had an encounter, I believe. So the thing that keeps me drawn in is not the scientific evidence, and you could argue there's some here and there. It's not the inconclusive video or audio, and the audio I think is sometimes more terrifying or interesting than the video. It's the first-hand reports, like you guys were talking earlier. Someone tells you something, you go, these guys aren't crazy. Right. I heard the types of stories you're talking about. That photographer. Right. I've heard stories like that all across the board. When I hear John Mazinski telling me a couple of stories, I'm going, I'm in. That's the thing that keeps me in.
We finally have a question tonight. I don't know if Bill, if you're there, if you want to pop up James West's question, and Charlie, you want to go ahead and read it?
Sure. It says, from what you've heard through research, do you feel that the Bigfoot's ceremonial bury their dead?
I mean, I've heard all kinds of different stories. If you talk to a scientist like Jeff Meldrum, he'll talk about we don't see a lot of bare bones, right? Right. But the thing is, and I agree with that completely. I mean, who I did dismiss his science, but they got to be putting them somewhere, or maybe that's one of the compelling things. I've heard people say they live in the sides of waterways, and so where are they putting these bones? That's the whole thing. No, seriously, do they scatter them? Do they break them up? Do they? I mean, it's tough to get rid of the bones there whatsoever. And how many Bigfoot are there actually? I mean, are they in every single state? I mean, there's only one state that doesn't have a report of them, which is Hawaii, but every other state has reports there. So. I don't know where the heck these bones go. I mean, I can't imagine that there's this large cache, though, because if there is, inevitably you would think we would find it. Right. Or actually, when you think about that, the things that seem kind of crazier, or maybe not the right word, more bizarre, more off the grid of being paranormal, maybe that sort of makes you think that more. Because where are these bones going? I mean, I have no idea.
I think Jeff Meldrum was quoted, and I could be wrong. He said somewhere between 1,800 and 2,500 breeding population within the United States. I think that's what he believes there might be. And if that's the case, and they do occupy, let's say, from British Columbia down through Michigan, and let's say the northern part of the United States, right? That would be, and they're apex predators. That's a moving needle in a haystack. So yeah, I would think that with technology, with the drones, with traffic cameras, with all these trail cameras out there, somebody, if it does exist, somebody's going to run it. Either it's going to get hit by a truck, or it's going to be someone's going to find some proof. Joe, I cannot thank you enough for spending this hour with us tonight. It has flown by. Before we sign out, Chuck and Sean, do you have any questions that you want to ask for Joe before we go?
Joe, just real quick, as far as don't sell the sitting in the back of a house too short, because I'm working a property. Mike and I, another guy in our group, is we're working a property in Northwest New Jersey, and we actually had some experiences sitting on this lady's deck. So it's kind of I think it all depends on the area you're in.
No, you're absolutely right. I have read some stories in there. It's just, it seemed weird to me because it was like we're having a picnic in his backyard. Nothing's going to happen to that. You're probably sitting in the backyard quietly observing and looking, and that makes a lot more sense to you. So no,
I think it fell on his back because we were in the woods on her property, and my friend Mike did some clacking, and then I think it followed us back, paralleled us, and then did some clacking, and then a wood knock, and then a tree push down. So I mean, it was kind of freaky.
We're hoping to capture some of that.
Power there. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, well, when you come to Jersey, we'll bring you there.
All right.
Definitely going to stay in touch.
Maybe go to the Pine Barrens, right?
What's that?
Maybe go to the Pine Barrens?
Oh, goddamn. I knew
I'm out of it.
Gotta get to the Pine Barrens.
Anyway, so the book is Monster Trek, The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. Joe Gisondi has been an amazing guest. I do want to take the time to thank him, and I want to thank all of you for watching the show, participating in the chat. If you made a donation, thank you. If you liked what you saw tonight, or even if you didn't, join our Facebook group, the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. Joe, I think you have a website, correct?
I have actually. If you want to follow me better on Twitter, Monster Trek JG. I'll reshare things or anything that happens there.
We'll put that link in the show.
Yeah, most of the other stuff I do is more sports oriented. Right. That probably would not be of interest.
Hey, it doesn't matter, man. It's all that. So also, if you want to report a sighting or if you want to have the CARC investigate your property, email us at carcgroup@gmail.com. So the upcoming guests, just real quick, we got August 10th, Bigfoot researcher RPG stops by to talk about infrasound. He'll talk with Chuck and Mike on the show. And then the 24th, Sean and I return for another round of howls with Julie Wrench and David Ellis. So once again, I'd like to thank Joe Gisondi, my buddies Chuck and Sean, everybody out there for watching the show. Be good, stay safe, and keep on squatching. And Bill, say goodnight for us, will you? Good night from behind tall trees. If you enjoyed the previous program, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment.